welcome back. We have with us Dr. Usman Chohan, who's advisor on CAS. Thank you so much for being with us today. We'll be talking about the impact of this investment as far as IFC is concerned and what it means overall, how it will lead to perhaps developments in infrastructure and overall boost economy, whether it will have a trickle-down effect, and what can we really expect in the next few years or so. How do you look at this, Dr. Usman, as far as this investment is concerned? First of all, the commitment itself, of course, is promising, and it's showing that there is some faith here as far as Pakistan and our ability on the economic front is concerned.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
The IFC is a sister organization to the World Bank and the IMF. It was created after World War II. And compared to the World Bank and the IMF, it is the most technical body among the three. So the IMF, as we have talked about at length, has its pluses and some minuses. World Bank a little bit less so, but still there's pluses and minuses. The IFC, you can say, is the cleanest, most technical, most engineering oriented of the three, and it has a very, very good track record in the developing world. So for example, much of their mandate over the last 70 odd years has been building dams, building bridges in the most remote areas, and then they evaluate that in terms of how much cost-effective analysis they had over an X period. So if these are the folks that are going to have an engagement, and it's multi-billion-dollar engagement, I think it's a very good sign, because these are the folks I would rather be talking to than the IMF, right? Especially if I'm not in distress. The IFC is the sort of organization that should be investing in the key infrastructure, healthcare, etc.
Can it be a substitute to IMF?
It can't, because they have different mandates. So the IMF is the person you go to as the emergency ward to give you liquidity in a difficult situation. The IFC, by contrast, looks at long-term horizon and says which investments would create the maximum value in infrastructure. Their personalities are different and their functions are very different. And in many ways, the World Bank, IMF, and IFC are all complementary. You need all three to have a successful development agenda.
Has this kind of a promissory investment ever happened as far as the IFC is concerned for Pakistan before?
Yes, the IFC was very active in the 50s, 60s particularly. That was a time when there was a lot of investment and infrastructure done in Pakistan, West Pakistan particularly, but also East Pakistan, as you know. And the IFC was looking at Pakistan as a particularly promising country, one where even a little bit of investment could go a long way, and it did. So Pakistan has come a long way since the quality of life was in the 50s, and standard of living and the amenities, etc. The IFC therefore did contribute, but IFC honestly had more focus on Southeast Asia, on Africa, and especially Latin America, because Latin America was the near abroad of the United States, so they wanted more attention here. So the head of the IFC is saying that no, actually Pakistan, given its size, given its importance, is something that we should have focused on, and we should be focusing on more. That's the context, really.
As far as this kind of potential for this equity-based transactions is concerned, how do you look at that in the future? Because of course, in the past, the situation hasn't been all that great for Pakistan. So, what do you envisage in the recent future, for example?
Both instruments can be fine, debt or equity, but honestly, a recipient country prefers equity, because equity shows that you have a stake in the project. Equity means that you will have much more oversight, and you don't automatically have to pay just like debt. You just have to pay even if it didn't work out. Equity means that both parties are much more aligned. As you know, like for example, Islamic banking is premised entirely on equity, because it's trying to wipe out the interest and the debt elements, because equity means that there's a partnership. And I think that the IFC focusing more on equity than debt is good, but it also reflects our debt profile. The IFC believes that this country has actually taken a lot of debt. It gets that info from its sister, from the IMF. And so maybe going debt is not the right way for a country, and Pakistan is not the only one. There's many Asian and African countries that are in this debt to GDP ratio range, where the point is, no, equity is probably better, even if we wanted to put debt, right?
But as far as equity overall is so, but doesn't it, in that sense, when of course it means having a stake, show that they have confidence that that we can do great things in that sense? Or is that too simplistic?
No, it's certainly true, because whenever two parties engage in equity-based investment, it means that they will be far more connected. They will seek alignment, even if that alignment might not be natural. So the IFC focusing on equity is showing a certain confidence that we want to be here for the longer run, which is our character anyways, the IFC. Equity should be the driver rather than the end of this debt and just let's wipe the slate clean. Instead, it's a longer term engagement, which is good for both sides, really.
So what does it really mean? It means that as far as infrastructure is concerned, they will have these projects which to the tune of roughly $2 billion within Pakistan. So they will be making developments that will of course pay off and will be equity based.
That's correct.
To whatever, whatever the ratio of that arrangement may be.
Yes, that's right. So basically, $2 billion per year, and then some multi-year thing. We're talking a decade or more. So when you have a list of projects, a string of projects, there will be due diligence from both sides. Will present ideas. They will say no, this one or that, and then you will prioritize among them and allocate. But the financing of that will be equity. So there will be this return on investment angle to it, rather than just pure development aid. I'm sure you've been following the stuff with the US aid and all that, how it's being cut down. The whole development aid has a track record of decades, of half a century. And so even if you are pro-US aid, you will say, well, does development aid really solve things, or does investment in countries through equity matter more? I think the 50-year, 60, 70-year, in fact, track record speaks much more towards investment rather than simple hand-giving, hand-wringing, and then passing on in the way that US aid has been doing.
As far as the US relationship and overall, as far as China is concerned, as far as CPEC is concerned, do you see this perhaps changing the pace of that also overall? Can it have an impact on that?
This is a very powerful question, because Pakistan, like many Asian countries, is a place with a massive infrastructure deficit, which means there's trillions of dollars that need to be put into Asian countries to address the infrastructure requirements of their populations. Pakistan happens to be a big country, the requirement is larger. That means that CPEC is a very critical and important piece, but even if CPEC goes to its fullest extent, there is still room for other things to happen. So the IFC is not working at cross purposes in any way. It has its own mandate, its own technical expertise. And so there's always room for more stuff to do in a country like Pakistan, because our population continues to grow, our requirements are there. So I don't see it in that context. But the reason I say it's a powerful question is because the US is changing so dramatically in its global stance towards the various 190 countries, that its soft power is very, very fragile right now. It projected power in certain ways, and there was a soft power element to being cool because you're being American, etc. That is really diminished over since COVID, particularly because of the impression that America has left. China, in the meanwhile, has continued its BRI investments, and that is a stable, steady process of partnership building. So if America has to make up in some way for the soft power, then it better be doing it. The IFC is not an example of that, because the IFC is considered neutral. So America itself needs to start investing in other countries, and it shouldn't be the USA manner. It should be an equivalent of the BRI that the US should be doing, which is separate from IMF, World Bank, and IFC.
But when we talk about, that's interesting, when you say that the US itself needs to start, investing in other countries. As far as US-India relationship is concerned, and with regard to Pakistan in particular, and the region overall, if India is so important, and we've seen, of course, the recent arm deal also, overall, do you think that it's going to, so we will need something, other than, of course, we need to have our own, substitutes, and we need to have our own economic plan.
Yes.
Of course, quite separate from whatever and however US and whatever transaction and US-India relationship.
Yes, very well put, because Pakistan should not depend on the stance of any country to drive its own agenda. I think that's what you're getting at, and I think that's true, that if the US engages with Pakistan or with other countries, that's fine, but Pakistan should be strong enough that it wouldn't really matter. And I support that. I can tell you that, for example, the Pakistan Air Force has had a very long-term vision and has calculated all the eventualities and is very long-term oriented and very professional in understanding how investments need to be done to protect our security, because deals like this can happen at any time among countries, and some people are not surprised by it. So certainly for the air part, not that it's my entire expertise, but I know that the Air Force has always maintained this long-term vision, which is laudable. And at the same time, Pakistan's economy overall, yes, money talks. And that factor is important. Building that indigenous capacity is something which we have conversed on a lot, and there are measures that need to be taken, but there is certainly the potential for driving those things.
What about this deal and the IFC, and of course the whole equity based investment that they're talking about, and its trickle down effect? Do you see it, and how much of a time roughly do you see, whatever 20-year time span, or what kind of a time span are you looking at for that to happen?
This is more about the character of infrastructure investment. Infrastructure investment is very, very important, and that's a good place where we can look at the United States not investing in infrastructure. A lot of their infrastructure was mid-20th century, it's dilapidated, and that's why they are in many ways falling behind China, which has newer infrastructure and constantly prioritizes infrastructure. That applies to us too. Any investment in infrastructure has to be evaluated over a longer term horizon, and it's in terms of the externalities. So for example, transport means who gained economically from having better transport, or the resources that were available to households because the water table rose. That sort of thing is evaluated in a more complex and long-term manner, multi-decade manner. And the IFC's projects will have to be evaluated in that way, but they have a tradition of doing that, and they have a lot of technical expertise on the accounting and economic side to look at how good things are in terms of the value created. Naturally, they'll have an incentive to exaggerate the benefits because they want to make the point that they are so helpful, but even if they push the numbers up a little bit, there's no question that IFC investments overall have been very, very good for developing countries. Definitely more so. For example, they had a lot of good work that they did in Central and Southern Africa in the 70s and 80s, at a time when there was apartheid, there was civil wars occurring, Angola, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, etc., or Rhodesia at the time. And the IFC presence there meant that important dams and roads and stuff was kept outside the politics, which was very toxic at that time in Southern and Central Africa, and was able to push things that have had benefits. Perhaps it's time for a new round of that, but I believe that China is the one that's filling that gap in that region now. The IFC has receded in importance.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Usman Chohan, for summing things up so eloquently for us overall. As far as IFC's investment is concerned, certainly it's something to look forward to as far as Pakistan, and it also shows a lot of confidence as far as the IFC is concerned in Pakistan's economy at this time. Its overall effects as far as a trickle-down effect for the people of Pakistan, of course, can be seen if we look at the long-term horizon. And of course, it also shows a confidence in the current measures that have been taken on the economic front. Let's hope that we can continue further down this road, and let's hope that we will be able to fulfill our hopes on the economic front and the government's efforts in that direction. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.